summarize the way how the books of Sister White were classified, and we will see more in detail the process of this research from the lawyers that were hired to explain this point. So the first category that Sister White himself presented were the testimonies. Select Messages, Book 1, page 49 says, those who carefully read the testimonies as they have appeared from the early days need not be perplexed as to their origin. The many books written by the help of the Spirit of God bear a living witness to the character of the testimonies. So it's clear for us, and we have explained it at the beginning, with the origin of the testimonies. Testimonies is the starting concept that we find when we study the spirit of prophecy in our present time. And testimonies have to do with the witnessing, with giving messages for especially private persons or even visions, but in a very close circle. Now, we find here 1851, a sketch of the Christian experience and views of Ellen G. White. 1854, supplement to the Christian experience and views of Ellen G. White. 1855, testimony for the church number 1. 1856, testimonies for the church number 2. And until 1857, that appear also testimonies for the church number 3 and number 4. Then 1858, the Spiritual Gifts, Volume 1. Then intermittently appear the combination between the testimonies for the church and spiritual gifts. This is the main first classification that was done from this group of lawyers. The second one that they considered was the Great Controversy series. And in the Colport Ministry, page 125 says, Sister White is not the originator of these books. They contain the instruction that during her life work, God has been giving her. They contain the precious, comforting light that God has graciously given his servant to be giving to the world. So again, the confirmation that the books were not given from the first chapter until the last chapter. They were gathered from all kinds of visions, articles, statements, diaries, personal testimonies during all this long period of time, and then become books. So this was an extremely important element to consider. Also in the Great Controversy series, because Prophet and Kings, that was published after her death, even in 1915, that was the last book of the series. So which was the last book of the series? The Great Controversy. Yes? I already mentioned. Yeah, for 2 seconds I have said it. Prophets and Kings, because I realize the majority are absent, so good. Then, if we have in perspective this, they presented a completely line. So they make a difference between the books that become pamphlets first and then after books, and the books that even were a compilation during the time of Sister White. So we find 1888, The Great Controversy, 1889, Testimonies, Volume 5, 1890, Christian Temperance and Bible Hygiene, 1892, Steps to Christ and Gospel Workers, 1894, Christian Education, 1896, Thoughts from the Mount of Blessing, 1897, Special Testimonies about Education, 1898, The Desire of Ages, 19, Hunter's Council on Sabbath School Work and Testimonies, Volume 6, 1902, the Colporteur Ministry and Testimony, Volume 7. 1902, Testimonies 8. 1903, Education. 1905, Ministry of Healing. 1909, Testimonies, Volume 9. 1911, the Acts of the Apostle. 1913, Counsels to Parent, Teachers, and Students, and many more. But it's very important not that you learn which book was in which date. That is the ideal, but I don't expect this because I am realistic, okay? So I don't expect this, but I expect that at least you can establish the period of times when the group of books appear, okay? For example, the Great Controversy series, when was the first and when was the last? Tell me. Was the first and when was the last? We have mentioned 5 minutes ago, even less than 5. 1915, when Prophet and Kings appear. Okay? 1898, the origin, 1950, the end of the period of this serious Great Controversy. How many years from 1888 to 1915?
27.
All this period of time took to finish all of the complete series. That was considered, especially through this group of lawyers, that are very important to consider. Now, after the final study of this group of lawyers, as I have mentioned to you, the resolution was that Ellen G. White is not guilty of breaking the law of copyright or plagiarism. This is the opinion of Vincent L. Ramick, partner of Diller Ramick Wright, Ltd., an attorney specialized in patents, trademarks, and copyrights in Washington, D.C. Now, let us see a little bit more in detail how they made this search and how they studied the subject. So, can please somebody read for us the second paragraph?
I can read.
Please, thank you.
Attorney Ramick started his investigation of Ellen G. White's writings after Warren L. Johns, chief of the legal department of the General Conference, requested the services of Diller. Ramick and White in April of last year because of the accusations made against Mrs. White by Walter Rhea, minister at that time in Long Beach, California. Ramick, a Roman Catholic who has dedicated more than 300 hours investigating more than 1,000 relevant cases of the legal American history. He concluded with an unequivocal declaration in his 27 pages of legal judgment. Based on a revision of the facts and legal reports, Ellen G. White was not a plagiarist and her works do not constitute an infraction/piracy of copyright.
So that was the official resolution. It's say here 27 pages. Gather all the final conclusion, but that is the most important for us. So let us see how the legal report was presented. Who is willing to read it for us, please?
The legal report was presented at the Johns office in late August. It addresses specifically 6 questions. Was there a copyright federal law between 1850, when Ellen G. White began publishing, and 1915, the year of her death, that gave rights to authors on their literature? If there was, what is the essence of this law? Did they differ substantially from the laws in 1981?
Thank you. Until here first. So, 6 main questions they needed to search in order to be sure if any copyright violation was infringed. So the first one, was there a copyright federal law between 1850 and 1950 that give rights to authors on their literature? This is the first one, okay? Was in existence a law that regulated? Because the point is, you cannot now judge one book that was written down 150 years ago with the laws that you have now. You need to judge if a violation is in existence according to the law of this time, okay? So this was the issue. So to say now that that was a mistake and that was a violation was not correct legally. So you need to prove that that was considered a copyright violation at that time. So the period that they covered was 1850 until 1950. So they needed to prove if was a law, what kind of law was, and if in some extent this law was violated. Okay? That was the first. Now, if there was, what is the essence of this law? Did they differ substantially from the laws in 1981? Okay? Because that was the period of time when they work. So this is not a completely old history, what we are dealing with. Okay? Because this Walter Rea, that was a Protestant ministry based on the accusations of Can Wright during the 50s and after, developed all these accusations that finish in this process. So that was the first question, to prove if was any violation according to the laws from 1850 to 1950. Okay, that was the first question. Yes, please.
Was the payment of royalties by the editors a commercial and legal practice at that time?
Okay, that is very important because was a regulation in the Review and Herald, and Sister White was paying royalties for the books, okay, for her books. And now the point was, okay, if royalty was paying, because this Walter Rea, I don't recommend it to read his book, because it's something, a terrible book. But anyhow, he said that Sister White was a millionaire because of the royalties that she received. And she always behaved as was a poor, humble lady. Okay, this is a personal attack against her. And then was needed to prove if royalties were paying, because if royalties were paying, this means that a copyright was done from the books. In the moment that a publishing house pay royalties to a specific author, this means that it's a contract between the author and the publishing house. The author gives the permission to print it and expect also a contribution according to the percentage that they agree. And was needed to find out if this was the case. This meant that Sister White took the complete responsibility about the authorship of the book, and the Review and Herald, the publishing house at this time, also shared this kind of responsibility if a copyright violation will be the case. So these will be two main accusers. Okay, so Sister White will be the main person accused, but also the printing house, because in the moment that the printing house, the Review and Herald, pay her royalties, this means that the publishing house received benefits from the selling of the book. So if they receive benefits and it's proof that it's a violation of copyright, he needed to pay back. This is the reason of this second question, to prove is a business transaction was the case. Because then the Review and Herald needed to go back and pay also the fine that the judge will decide about the copyright violation. So this is the second reason of the question. Okay, third one.
Was the agreement of permission for the use of literary property a business practice at that time?
Okay. Now, how was the regulation at that time? Because when this happened, was clear that every publishing house made a contract with the author, and they established which percentage the author will receive according to the selling price or the retail price or the printing price or the distribution price, no matter. So how was the custom or the use at this time specifically? The purpose was to find contracts. How does happen, and if this happened, if the Review and Herald was doing legally the things. Because this group of lawyers needed to investigate other publishing houses and to find them what kind of contracts they have with the authors, then compare the legal situation of the publishing house of the General Conference, Review and Herald, and see if they were in the right page legally with the process of printing. Okay, so that was most focused in the publishing house to find any irregularity according to the legal matters at this time. Okay, fourth question.
Was there a literary standard that established the use of quotation marks, footnotes, and page references in literary works that would use literary material from other authors?
Okay, now about the form. Not so much the content, but also the form. Because in the original ones, very few references related with footnotes or quotations or bibliography you find in the books. So if you compare now, will be a copyright violation. Today, this will be a copyright violation. But this book was not printed in 2012, but in 1888, the Great Controversy. So you need to consider this book in the legal establishment at this time about the way how the information was presented. Next question.
What law existed between 1850 and 1915 that would suggest the characteristics of the protection of a copyright literary piracy?
Okay, now the point was, exists any regulation? And if some regulation, legal regulation, exists related with this, what kind? With the limitations or the responsibilities of any part? And the last question, please.
Is there something among the works published by Ellen G. White that might suggest the existence of literary piracy, violation of federal copyright, in accordance with existing rules between 1850 and 1915?
Now is related with the content. The sixth question has to do with the content. The content in general is copied from other books, can be proven this, is part of a book, only sections, what kind of parallel you find with the content of the books of Sister White and other books that she may be used. Okay, so you have now the working guidelines that this group of lawyers have, and they needed to answer all these 6 questions in order to came to the conclusion if it's needed to pay and recognize that it's a copyright violation or not. So they follow these 6 main questions. So let us read for us, please. This is part of all the report of these lawyers, okay? I have summarized sections of it. Can please somebody that have not read for us until now?
The literary production of Ellen G. White has a range of approximately 25 million words and a 70-year period of a writing career. A great number of more than 90 books, including compilations, coming from her pen, have been translated into more than 100 languages. The fact that Ellen G. White would incorporate quotes and paraphrase material from other authors, mainly historians of the Reformation and contemporary devotional writers of the 19th century, in her books and articles is not what has been under discussion. During her life, she and the church leaders have repeatedly acknowledged that use, but Walter Rea took the time to identify the different sources from which she helped herself. This study showed that Mrs. White had used other sources more profusely than those previously estimated.
Okay, so what conclusion achieved this group of lawyers? They compared the work of Walter Rea, and they realized that they even discovered more than Walter Rea himself. And they also confirmed that that was a well-known fact during the time of Sister White. So it was not any conspiracy or any purpose of hiding anything. That was a completely public issue, well known for everyone, and they even mention more cases than Walter Rea. Okay. Next paragraph. We are selecting parts of this report from 27 pages, okay? Therefore, I wish to read it so that you have it as was originally. Somebody else, please. Now we are dealing with books without copyrights. Okay.
Ramick discovered that many of the books Ellen G. White had used had no copyright. He continued by saying that although she had been protected by law, the phraseology and even several paragraphs did not constitute a violation of copyright law or plagiarism. The problem had been brought to court between 1850 and 1915. Ellen G. White would not have been convicted of violating the copyright law, included Ramick.
Until here first. So, what they have done is that they gather all the books that Sister White have in her library and other books that also Walter Rea mentioned that Sister White received an inspiration from. Okay? So, and they investigate every single book. And 95% of all the books were without copyright. Okay? This is one point. The second point is that the information that is taken as reference for the books of the Spirit of Prophecy were paraphrasing sections. And according to the law, between 1850 and 1950, this will be not a violation of copyrights. Okay? Let us go to the next paragraph, please.
It is found it ironic that the fiercest critics of Ellen G. White offered the best evidence to support the position of non-infringement. At no time, Ramick said, could we find that the books of Ellen G. White followed virtually the same plan and character that of their predecessors. Neither did we find nor have their critics referred to it. In Ellen G. White, the intention to overlay her works in the market with the same class of readers and buyers. Instead, she invariably introduced a considerable amount of new material, going beyond mere cosmetic changes, and in effect created a completely original literary work.
So that was some of the evidences related with this first statement. And let us go further on with the same subject. Somebody else, please.
Furthermore, the full compilation of Ellen G. White's works necessarily reflect her work and skill. Since she did not copy, and the evidence makes it quite clear, any of the previous works to a substantial degree, she remains well within the legal margins of fair use. In addition, since materials were selected from a variety of sources and were arranged and combined with certain passages of the text of the original work, somehow proved the exercise of discretion, skill, experience, and judgment. The use was honest.
Yeah. So, next one, please.
Inclusion is a main ingredient that must be demonstrated in cases of plagiarism, and Ramick thinks that he has proven it not only through the statements published by Mrs. White herself, but for what her critics themselves admitted, that she did not try to commit fraud in using other literary productions. Proceeding with only the highest intentions and motives, said Ramick, Mrs. White modified, exalted, and improved much of what others had written in a completely ethical and legal manner. It is impossible to imagine that the intention of Ellen G. White, as her writings show, and her prodigious effort was nothing more than an effort motivated by sincerity and selflessness to convey the biblical truths in a consistent manner for all to see and understand. Moreover, the nature and content of her writings had a hope and intention, that mankind could understand the Word of God. In his paper, Ramick concluded, considering all the factors needed to reach a just conclusion on this matter, we declare definitely that the writings of Ellen G. White did not constitute plagiarism.
Okay, so that reference we are giving related with the no intentionality and no dishonesty were considered was a very important point. So that was related with the testimonies and the great controversy series. Let us consider now articles. What about this? Sister White herself said in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 67, I do not write one article in the paper expressing merely my own ideas. They are what God has opened before me in vision, the precious rays of light shining from the throne. Now, about the letters, what she said. Weak and trembling, I arose at 3 o'clock in the morning to write to you. God was speaking through clay. You might say that this communication was only a letter. Yes, it was a letter, but prompted by the Spirit of God to bring before your minds things that had been shown me. In these letters which I write, in the testimonies I bear, I am presenting to you that which the Lord has presented to me. Now, what about the interviews? He, Elder G.A. Irving, has with him a little notebook in which he has noted down perplexing questions which he brings before me, and if I have any light upon these points, I write it out for the benefit of our people, not only in America, but in this country. It's related with a subject in Australia. So we have here the general evolution of the publications. It's a scan from one of the, I think in the index is this. So we see the 6 questions that this group of lawyers consider, and again we confirm the references to it. Questions about this subject? Okay, I have 2 more presentations, but because of the time, I don't think that we are going to make it, but at least let me mention some. Especially because the point of health was a very insecure matter for Sister White at the beginning, and she felt very unqualified to this. Let us consider Ellen G. White's writings in medical science and some of the points that she mentioned that were completely unknown at her time, completely unknown. So the first was the prenatal influence. Please, can somebody read it for us?
The irritability, nervousness, and despondency manifested by the mother will mark the character of her child. In past generations, if mothers had informed themselves in regard to the law of their being, they would have understood that their constitutional strength, as well as the tone of their morals and their mental faculties, would in a great measure be represented in their offspring. What the parents are, that to a great extent the children will be. The physical conditions of the parents, their dispositions and appetites, their mental and moral tendencies, are to a greater or less degree reproduced in their children.
So that was something completely new for the science at the time of the writings of Sister White. That was not at all considered, not even thoughts were expressed related to this. That was any relationship between the baby and the mother during the pregnancy period. So this prenatal influence was completely new. Let us see why the medical science say related to this in 1954. So we made like a comparison, right? Okay, please read it for us.
Dr. Ashley Montague, 1954. For years, men of science believed that before birth, children lived a separate life, protected from every outside influence. But this is not true. Existing news reveal that you can control your child's development even before birth. The child's mental and physical health starts with the fetus health. Care has to start with the attention given to the fetus. This is as important as the well-being of the mother who nourishes it.
Okay, and Sister White wrote a lot related with this, yeah? How she feels, what kind of thoughts she has, everything have influence upon the fetus, especially because it's part of her body, it's not a different part of her body. So therefore, we find completely articles about this influence, okay, and confirm after. Let us speak about tobacco. that was considered at the time of Sister White a medicine, was even given as a prescription from the doctors, tobacco. So what she wrote was completely new and even unbelievable for the science at this time. Please read it for us.
Tobacco is a slow, insidious, but most malignant poison. In whatever form it is used, it tells upon the Constitution. It is all the more dangerous because its effects are slow and at first hardly perceptible. It excites and then paralyzes the nerve. It weakens and clouds the brain. Often it affects the nerves in a more powerful manner than does intoxicating drink. It is more subtle and its effects are difficult to eradicate from the system. Tobacco is a poison of the most deceitful and malignant kind, having an exciting and a paralyzing influence upon the nerves of the body. It is all the more dangerous because its effects upon the system are so slow, and at first scarcely perceivable. Multitudes have fallen victims to its poisonous influence. They have surely murdered themselves by this slow poison.
Thank you. Let us go. I take references not for our present time, but so near as possible to the time of Sister White. And that was from the first references from the science, and this is 1957. Can please somebody read it for us?
Dr. Alton Oshner, 1957. In 1957, the North American Cancer Society, the North American Cardiology Association, the National Cancer Institute, and the National Cardiology Institute, these two are federal entities, named a commission of 7 scientists to study and evaluate all the available information about the effects of smoking on health. They were chosen for their integrity and capacity to analyze with a critical spirit the experimental and clinical researches. After 1 year of study, they came to the following conclusion. The total review of scientific evidences establishes beyond any doubt that cigarette smoking is a determined factor for the ever more increasing manifestation of epidermal lung cancer in human beings.
So we see here that first, in this time, they began to build a commission to investigate if tobacco have any effect in the health. And we know that was long before already mentioned, cancer. Somebody else, please.
Cancerous humor, which would lay dormant in the system, their lifetime is inflamed and commences its eating destructive work. People are continually eating flesh that is filled with tuberculosis and cancerous germs. Tuberculosis, cancer, and other fatal diseases are thus communicated. If meat eating was ever helpful, it is not safe now. Cancers, tumor, and pulmonary diseases are largely caused by meat eating. Flesh meats constitute the principal article of food upon the table of some families, until the blood is filled with cancerous and scrofulous humors. Their bodies are composed of what they eat, but when suffering and disease come upon them, it is considered an affliction of providence.
Okay, this is what Sister White said. Let us see 2 main sections related with this, and the first is from 1956, the second from 1961.
It is known that viruses can hide in the human body for years, sometimes the whole life. Some of them causes problems, others none. Dr. Stanley says that in some cases, cancer viruses can become active due to circumstances such as age, inadequate diet, hormonal imbalance, chemical products, radications, or the combination of all these factors capable to produce malignant cancerous tumors. Dr. Hubner based his theory on the belief that the cancer virus remains latent in the organism until conditions such as hormones, age, or chemical irritants, substances give it the opportunity to produce a malignant cancerous tumor.
So these kind of decisions or resolutions were taken at this time, and much more was even said from Sister White many years before. So about electric currents in the brain and nervous system. Let us read it, please.
Whatever disturbs the circulation of the electric currents in the nervous system lessens the strength of the vital powers, and the result is a deadening of the sensibilities of the mind. The electric power of the brain, promoted by mental activity, vitalizes the whole system and is thus an invaluable aid in resisting disease.
Thank you. Let us see when they realize that have an importance. In the Science American magazine, June 1954 says,
during the last quarter of a century, the study of these undulated lines, has developed into becoming a new scientific branch named electrocephalography. Actually, hundreds of laboratories in the United States and many others in Europe register and interpret the corresponding graphics of human brains' electric discharges. The annual total outcome of these electrophalograms for the laboratories could encircle the Earth.
Okay, we see here that these electroencephalograms began their use in order to prove and to confirm that is a nervous system rechargeable operation in the brain near the 1950s. And many years before, Sister White, through inspiration, presented this point: fat and cardiovascular diseases.
Both the blood and the fat of animals are consumed as a luxury, but the Lord gave special directions that these should not be eaten. Why? Because their use will make a diseased current of blood in the human system. The disregard for the Lord's special directions has brought a variety of difficulties and diseases upon the human beings. If they introduce into their systems that which cannot make good flesh and blood, they must endure the results of their disregard of God's word.
Thank you. We find here especially the biblical confirmation that fat and blood cannot be consumed in any circumstance. So in 1960, in Time magazine, December 26, was confirmed the relationship between fat and cardiovascular diseases.
A reduction or control of fat consumption under medical supervision, accompanied by the replacement of polysaturated fats by saturated fats, is recommended as a possible way to prevent arteriosclerosis and lessen the risk of heart attacks and apoplexy.
So we see that in this time, it's not so far from us, it's even considered a possibility, when long before was confirmed as a fact. Okay, that was a short overview about this, and let us see about the development of the doctrine. Ellen G. White writings and doctrine. So the relationship between the writings of Sister White and the church has accompanied all the different process in the structure and the confirmation of the church. Was in the development of the first movement and the organization and the different reforms like health reform, educational reform, dress reform, etc. Councils were part of the testimonies giving, and especially the reconfirmation of doctrinal points. So in these four main sections, we find the input of the testimonies in the development of the church. Without exception, and always through the period of time, the approximately 70 years of active work, she says, I recommend it to you, dear reader, the Word of God as the rule of your faith and practice. By that word we are to be judged. God has in that word promised to give visions in the last days, not for a new rule of faith, but for the comfort of his people and to correct those who err from Bible truth. So in no case, no circumstances, she uphold or lift up the testimonies about the Bible. Always confirm that the rule of the Bible principles are the only rules to follow. For example, one of the main prophetical principles for interpretation established in the Advent movement was presented by William Miller, the principle day for a year, and also the principle of prophetic interpretation, especially related with Daniel 8:4. That was not presented first by Sister White. That was presented first by William Miller, but that was also, even William Miller was not the first, but through him came again to the surface and become official principle of interpretation. So Sister White was not the first that established this principle, okay? Let us see about the judgment precedes second coming. The explanation of Revelation 20, the explanation about the character, the establishment of character before the second coming, that the judgment has two phases, the investigative and the executive. All these main principles were preached by Josias Leach, one of the pioneers of the Seventh-day Adventist history. Again, Hiram Edson, through him was presented the vision when Jesus went from the holy place to the most holy in order to complete the work of intercession before the second coming of Christ. Also, he wrote different articles. One especially presented the explanation of Revelation 10:10, that is the prophecy about the disappointment of the October 22nd, that the Adventist work is not finished, also according to Revelation 10. It's a beautiful set of articles about Revelation 10 from Hiram Edson. And especially the sanctuary emphasized the importance of God's law. That was a combined article with Crozier and Hiram Edson related with Revelation 11:19, that the prophet saw that the sanctuary was open and the Ark of the Covenant was there. So all these main principles related with the major doctrinal foundations of the Seventh-day Adventists were given through different pioneers. We find here Owen R.L. Crozier. He wrote a series of articles that after came like a pamphlet about the sanctuary in Daniel 8:14, and the proof that is the heavenly sanctuary. And he tried to explain the mistake that was done to believe that this purification was the earth, and he proved that was the heavenly sanctuary. Also the parallel between the earthly sanctuary as a type of the heavenly one. The fulfillment of the antitype expiation day will take many years. That was also Crozier. That the sanctuary had two classes of rituals, the daily service and the annual one. That was again presented there. The transferring of sin from the holy place to the most holy place, and the purification of the Day of Atonement also. The explanation about the system of sacrifice, the difference between all the variations in the sacrifices. And especially the two veils. The importance of the veils related with the ministry of Jesus was also emphasized in this series of articles. About the midnight cry vision in December 1844 that Sister White received, put together part of the information from all these pioneers and expanded to even more information. So that was a reconfirmation, but also an explanation of these same doctrinal points. And this was the way how worked out. Then the vision of the bright room vision from February 1845 is again a supported vision for the articles of Edson and Crozier ideas presented in the form of articles. The New Earth vision in 1845 confirmed also and amplified the vision from the 144,000, the time of Jacob travel, the seal of God, the vision of the time of trouble also, and the descent of the New Jerusalem. And all these different elements were in some extent already mentioned and part of the doctrine. But especially in June 1858, a more extended explanation of the sanctuary was given in a chronological and systematical way. And we find this partially also after in the book Patriarchs and Prophets. And the book Christ in the Sanctuary, a compiled work after Sister White's death, that put together many articles that she wrote about the sanctuary. They put all this together in a book, in the way also as the visions were given and become articles, and then the completely view about the sanctuary came in a very easy way to be understood. So with this, we have tried to present it to you how the spirit of prophecy is a gift that the Lord has given since when?
Beginning, the start of the world.
Since the falling in sin.
Yes.
Okay? Because before falling in sin was not needed. Was not needed because human beings have the opportunity to see God face to face. So they don't need any intermediator or any system or any kind of method to receive the communications of God, because Jesus was in Eden every evening speaking with Adam and Eve. Also the angels came personally and explained many things. So the spirit of prophecy was not needed. The spirit of prophecy came to existence as a need in the moment that the human being fall in sin. And a new system of communication needed to be established. So this is not something that appeared with Sister White, and this is the reason why we have considered Old Testament and New Testament until our present time. And the spirit of prophecy not finished with Sister White, because Joel chapter 2 and Joel chapter 3 confirm us that even this gift will increase and will be distributed again in order to finalize the great work of salvation on this earth. So may the Lord help you in the study of these lessons in order to have the right understanding of this important subject, not only from the past, but also from the present and the coming future. Is my wish and prayer. Amen.